All right, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Brewer from Zephyr Hills PD. He has 23 years experience in law enforcement. He actually just celebrated his 23rd year last week, so I'm really excited to have him as a guest. Welcome to the show, Chief Brewer. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's an important topic and appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, well, honestly, like the pleasure's all mine. I appreciate you taking the time. I know that you have a lot of things going on running an organization, so thank you for being here. I wanted to ask you, did those 23 years go by fast, or does it feel like it's been 23 years?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the day. We, to be honest with you, when I reflect on my career, it does feel like it's gone by pretty fast. And then there's times where I look at um, everything that I've gone through, and I do realize that it has been a long time. So I guess it just depends on the day, but you know, I love what I do, so I don't really I don't look back and regret. So it's what's that phrase that people use? If you love what you do, you never feel like you work a day in your life. So and I certainly do. So
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're right. I mean, I feel like there's some phases in my life that feel like they're just dragging on. And usually it's the challenging times, right? It's like time flies when you're having fun and when things are
right.
really good. And then when it's challenging, it seems to be like slow motion. So I can understand that there's kind of those phases of time. But I feel like the older I get, the more time goes by so fast. Like I don't know if you or anyone listening to this can relate to that, but I had someone recently, she just had a baby, and I was like, "How's your little baby?" And she's like, "She's 5 months." And I was like, "That's impossible," and you feel like
Right.
things kind of the older you get, it's like things go by so fast. I wanted to ask you why you chose this career. Really, kind of in essence, what is your why? Why did you step into the career of law enforcement?
Really, it was because I felt like my personality kind of fit what policing is about. Um, I don't like using the cliche of, helping people, but I just kind of felt like I had the demeanor to handle situations um, with compassion, with empathy, and still be able to take control of situations. So it was about more of a self reflection of what I thought would best suit me as a person.
And I love that you use the words compassion and empathy because I think that those are learned skills. And I think that, I mean, from my experience, there are things that I went through in my life that taught me how to be empathetic and compassionate. Was there anything that you felt like you went through in your life that gave you those skills, or do you feel like you were just innately empathetic and compassionate, and it's just who you are?
Um, I think certainly it's part of my upbringing. I think, both of my parents were certainly compassionate and empathetic people. So it's part of my upbringing. Plus, I had three sisters. So, that kind of uh, forces you to show a little empathy. But at the same time, I can't point to anything specific, but I would definitely say that all of life's hardships change your perception of how you handle things. Certainly, I've made my mistakes and learned from them, and that's the important thing. And but I do think it's very important to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes. That's the best way to solve problems.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I would argue that I've learned way more from the hard things in life than I have from the easy stuff. I
Yeah.
think that you can kind of coast a little bit when things are easy and it doesn't really force you to look at yourself and what you're doing because it just feels easy. And I think that the hard times, the challenging times, those are an opportunity for growth and for you to take a step back and say, okay, how am I responding to this? How am I treating people? What can I learn from this? So I love that you said that, and I couldn't agree more. And I think it's hard in the hard times to view it that way of like, oh, this is a really, really great, fun opportunity to grow. When you're in it, it doesn't feel that way. But I think when you have that hindsight of like, wow, that was really, really hard, but I'm grateful for that opportunity to become a better person and to, lead in a different or better way. And, I think that hindsight's always 2020. But for me,
Yeah,
all the hard stuff, like in the moment, sucked. I didn't like it at
yeah,
all. But now I'm like, wow, that really gave me a cool opportunity to be better.
yeah. And I think you're right because I still, to this very day, regardless of whether it's while I was chief or either other situations where things didn't go really how you planned them to go, or you knew you had to take a certain action, but you wish you had a kind of identified the problems a little bit sooner, that maybe you could have taken a different action. And that's been really my philosophy as being in leadership is, okay, I know this was hard. I had to make this decision, but there's probably a better way for me to prevent that in the future. And I'm still going through that and have that even today where I'm applying previous hardships to how I approach a new situation, but similar circumstances.
100%. And I think that if you can maintain that mentality of being a learner and you have that open mind to be able to grow and adapt, like that's going to make you even better in the future. Like anyone who's listening, it doesn't matter if you're, a chief or you have a different role within the organization. I think having that learner's mentality is always going to push you forward in a positive way.
I I agree. Yes.
How did how did this job affect your personal, mental, and physical wellness? I know that we talked offline a little bit, and you said that maybe there were some injuries that you had gone through in your career. If you could give us a little insight into, what you experienced personally in the physical and mental wellness space.
Yeah. So from a physical aspect, I think I would have focused a little bit more on my core strength.
Mm.
I've always um, tried to do my best to maintain a level of fitness, but you know, again, life kind of gets in the way, family life, your career. But I had some injuries that kind of wish I had spent more time focusing on my core strength. Um, Back injuries, hip injuries that I'm still dealing with today. But at the same time, it's I'm doing what I can now to try to make that um, not become so debilitating. Um, I think part of my, I'd say, daily routine of stretching has been by far the most important part of me being able to fight through some of that discomfort and pain. So
100%. I love that you said, I wouldn't say I love that you said, but I know you said back pain was, or back injuries was one of them, but you said core. And that was the piece where I was like, yes, like core, when it comes to injury prevention and injury recovery, core stability is so important. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And it's not six pack abs. There's a statistic that says you're more likely to be a millionaire than have six pack abs. And I don't know about you, but I'm not a millionaire. So,
I certainly know. Yeah.
but core strength is so important for injury prevention, injury recovery. It protects your spine, it protects your low back. It's basically your body's natural girdle. It also helps with balance and coordination, so you're less likely to trip and fall. So, core is huge. I love that that's something that's been a focus. And then mobility. Um, we know, I mean, there's so much information out there, but we know that mobility and yoga can reduce your risk of injury 25 to 50%. And then it also helps to reduce back pain by 64%. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to in law enforcement that talk about their back hurting. It's like, and it's interesting because like the statistics show that 40% of law enforcement have back pain. I think it's higher than that.
I would bet on that. Yeah.
I really do. So I love that you said that mobility has really helped you to alleviate pain and that you're focusing on core strength now to try to reduce your risk of injury from happening in the future. I think that's great.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to retire and have to worry about, additional surgeries. And, I think that just kind of makes it a little harder to sit back and relax and enjoy retirement. You want to be active. You don't want to be sedentary. So, um,
100%.
you know, trying to get through those injuries now before that is certainly, I think, key.
And would you say that that is your wellness why is so that you can have a long and successful retirement, or is there a why that's kind of kept you motivated to prioritize your wellness?
Well, I think, as you go through the career, you certainly identify those things when you're challenged with them. No different than your mental health wellness. Um, when you're talking about mental health, for me, it's always been how do I detach? How do I detach myself from the job and find a way to recharge? And I think that has been more important in my life now because as we've talked offline is it's more than just physical health, it's mental health, um, it's the whole package. But um, yeah, I want to enjoy life when I retire. I want to be able to enjoy my wife, my kids, my grandkids eventually. And um, I mean, you don't work this hard and do this job so you can do it forever. You do it so that you can go on and enjoy yourself afterwards. And that's kind of my plan. I don't have a specific plan on what I'm going to do after retirement, but um, certainly the plan is to enjoy myself more.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think everyone has different motivations with why they prioritize their wellness and a lot of times it's going to be reactive, right? It's going to be like after an injury or after some sort of mental health challenge or your bucket kind of overflows where you're like, okay, now I need to focus on this. And obviously we want to be more proactive and try to put in place things where we can reduce the risk from happening in the first place. But I think that there's always going to be both. There's always going to be proactive and reactive measures that have to take
Right.
place. But I would say that almost everyone I talk to at the core, it's what you said, it's longevity. It's like, how can you have a long and successful career, a long and successful life, and then a long and successful retirement? I don't know anyone who would raise their hand and say, yes, I want to work really, really hard for, 20, 30 plus years in law enforcement, and then I want to retire and only live for a few years after that. Or like you said, not be able to move and not be able to enjoy my life. Nobody wants that. So I
Right.
think that at everyone's core, it is longevity. And so, how can we put in place, tools and resources that are going to help you to achieve that? I know you said your family is a huge motivator for you, and, throughout your career, being able to detach and be present in your home life. How did you balance that work home life throughout your career? And how do you encourage, younger officers or individuals within your organization to do the same?
Well, I would say that's the biggest challenge, especially when you love what you do. You're very um, uh, committed and convicted to what you're doing, and I think it's easy to ignore your personal life. Um, but I, everybody has that little angel on your shoulder, kind of reminding you have to um, spend time with the things that are not work related. And certainly my wife and my kids have provided that to, hey, we're doing things here. We want you to be part of that. And they're always that subtle reminder um, that you need to spend time here and not so much at work. Um, it's hard, obviously, when police work at least for me, is 24/7, 365. So it is kind of hard to kind of put it away. Uh, but I think at the same time, the uh, I'm finding more ways to at least recharge. And if that, even if that means um, spending time fishing or going to a hockey game with my son, or, even if it's for a short period of time, I try to focus on those things. Um, Even though I still may get phone calls during that time, I think it's just very important to make sure you have some sort of an outlet.
And I love that you mentioned healthy outlets because I think that sometimes, especially when you're really stressed, it's like, oh, I need to decompress. And so therefore, I'm going to binge watch 10 hours of TV, which I'm not saying I've never done that before. I'm human, I've definitely done that before. Or I'm going to go to the bar, or I'm going to gamble, or whatever. Like there's a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms. And
Yeah.
for you to say, hey, have outlets that help you to actually genuinely recharge that are healthy for you. And you said fishing and spending time with your family. I think that you're right. It is really hard. And I love what I do. And I know that you love what you do too. And anyone who's listening to this, there has to be a passion for what you do to do your job, right? Your job is incredibly challenging and I'm sure incredibly rewarding. And you have to have that passion and that drive to do it. I also love my job and I love what I do. And I have made the mistake in my life of prioritizing my work over my family. And those have been some of my biggest regrets in life, to where I thought I had time with people that I didn't have time with, and those people are now gone. And I was like, wow, that thing that I prioritized in my professional life did not matter as much as I thought it did in that moment, especially when it comes to losing time with loved ones, and I think that you can do both. Yes, it is hard, but you can love what you do and be fully dedicated to your job, but you can also prioritize your family and your friends and things outside of the job. And it is a balance, like you said, that word balance, I think, is what everyone strives for, but it's the hardest thing. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to have events happen in your life where you do, maybe have those regrets to then reposition your focus and your priorities.
Yeah, it always, well, those challenges, personal challenges, always put things in perspective. So, and I'm certainly no stranger to that. And um, doesn't mean that, my job is a little bit higher than the personal life, but it's a constant struggle of trying to find a way to make sure they both get the attention they need.
Well, and I think that the interesting thing about balance, like if you kind of did this with your hands and no one's watching, but if you think about that, like balancing, um, like image or video that you see where it's kind of like this, it's like not
Yeah,
everything is going to be equal. There's going to be times where, the career is going to demand more of your time and attention. And then there's going to be other times where your family is going to demand, more of your
sure.
attention. And so it's not always equal. And I think that that's the thing about balance. And it's never steady. There's going to
Yeah.
be some ebbs and flows to it. And so, how can you manage that and make sure that you're just doing the best that you can? And I think that's the thing. It's like when it comes to wellness and everything can be so overwhelming, but it's like, how can you just do the best that you can and have the awareness
Yeah.
around it so that, um, if and when your family needs you the most, you can be there. So, and then vice versa with the career. I know that wellness is something that you're prioritizing organizationally, and you're really trying to build a robust wellness program. And one of the things that you told me that really stuck out to me was this philosophy of it's not your program, it's their program. Give me a little insight on what you mean by that and the things that you're doing organizationally.
Well, I'm certainly not going to say that I know what everybody needs. I don't, when it comes to this, I write policy all day long, it seems like. But this is one of those things where I don't know better. Um, they know what they need to be successful. They know what they need to be um, physically strong, mentally strong. So it doesn't make much sense for me to say, we're going to do this, this, and this when that's not what they're going to use. That's not what they're going to do. So I want it to be their program and I just want to support it. And a lot of our program does kind of center around peer support. Um, and I have tried to build a family atmosphere so that we can identify those situations before they come life changing or career changing. Certainly, if they're committed to it, if they are, um, if it's their program, they're more apt to pick up the signs way before I would.
Mhm.
And I think that's the key is, they're the ones facing the physical and mental and emotional challenges of the job. And supporting their wellness isn't just good for them; it's good for the community. So I really want to make sure that whatever we're putting in place, it's something that they're going to do for their own wellness, and it's certainly not a one size fits all. So
Yeah, and I appreciate that approach. One of the conversations I've had a lot recently, and you can tell me if you agree or if you have different perspectives, but it's this idea of like culture first. And then like everything else is in addition to that. But if you don't have that, like you said, that family environment where people are encouraging wellness, they're looking out for each other, then you could throw the whole kitchen sink at everyone and say, here's all these wellness programs. But if they're not receptive to it, if there's not like kind of that foundation of wellness, then it's not going to be utilized and it's not going to be successful. Do you agree? I see you shaking your head. Do you agree with that?
com- completely, I can tell you that was from day one for me. Um, Becoming chief, culture was my number one priority because um, it's the job is hard enough as it is, and to have to come to work and not be happy and worry about internal conflict and um, it just makes it that much more difficult. And I don't think you're doing your community service or you're doing a disservice to the community by bringing in unhappy, um, emotionally unprepared officers to do the job. So I do think that that has been my priority because um, I want you to be happy coming to work. Um, there were times in my career where I was miserable, but I loved the job. I loved what I did, but I was miserable coming to work. And I just said, this is affecting my physical and my emotional well being. Um, and that was my priority, just making sure people are supporting each other in a healthy way. Um, yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Well, and I think it just really comes full circle to what we talked about before, where you had that firsthand experience of like, I was miserable on the job. Like I still loved it and I still wanted to do it, but I came to work and I did not enjoy that because of the internal stressors that were going on, in addition to the external stressors that you also have to. So it's compounding. So because you experienced that, and obviously you don't want anyone to have to experience that, but because you did, now you can come from, this perspective, this mentality of like, I don't want my people to be like that. And so you use that as a learning and growth opportunity to then lead better and to be there for your organization. I also think it's full circle because what you said, if people aren't happy at work, then they're not happy in the community, then they're not happy at home. And then that happens for however many years, and then they retire and
Yeah.
that longevity isn't there. So I really think that that comes back to everything that we said. It's like, how can you, kind of mitigate that as much as you can? And it sounds like to me, you're like, start with culture. and then
Yeah.
everything else will be better.
Yeah. And we do, I'm very particular about um, my hires when it comes to that. You know, I want people to be humble, have a little humility. I think that's important to making sure that the culture is right. You know, I think police work kind of, um, for the most part, attracts type A with a little bit of ego. So I do think it's important that we find times to humble ourselves and, you know, remember why we do the job. And, um, you know, it's not all about power and, you know, making arrests. It's about what difference are you making in the community. And that we really try to reinforce that.
Yeah. And I think that when you are when you're doing good things in the community supports you more too, and that's helpful. So when
Yes.
you're out in the community, it's not like you're just dealing with bad stuff all the time. Like you also have people who are grateful to you and smile and wave and they're appreciative. And so the more you can give to them, the more they're going to give back to you. And so it's a partnership. I also wanted to circle back to one thing that you said before about your programming, about how it's not a one size fits all. And I completely agree with you. I think everyone is going to learn differently, everyone's going to need different things. And so, we talked a little bit about this and offline, and I really liked what you said about how your wellness offerings and program is always evolving. And so you're always trying to reassess like what else do we need, what is working, what isn't working, so that you can continue to build a robust program that is actually benefiting your people. And I think that is to me the most important. And I've said this so many times and I just really believe it. Like I could have the best program in the world. And if nobody uses it, it doesn't matter. And so this idea of just like checking a box to say like, yeah, we have all these things, but there's no utilization because people don't care about it, or maybe the platform isn't, um, in a way that people find it accessible or whatever it is. And so I loved that mentality. And I wanted to kind of call you out on that of saying like, we're always trying to reassess. We don't want to just check a box. We want something that's, forever evolving so that we can make sure that it's actually benefiting people.
Yeah, I think it's pretty normal in law enforcement to, like you said, check boxes to say, oh, we have a policy on this, we have a policy on that, and certainly there are times for that. But I think when it comes to wellness, and we evaluate our policies regularly. It's part of our accreditation process, and I don't think that this is any different. So we do meet probably quarterly to biannually, just to talk about what the programs we have, what do we want to incorporate, what, like you said, what is working, what's not working. I think it's, I certainly don't want to spend time and effort and resources on stuff that's not going to be used.
Right.
Doesn't make any sense. Um, so I do think that just that constant um, dialogue of what can we do better, um, and how, who's going to use what, and will it be effective. And I'd even say that I've, in our fitness program, yes, I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I wanted them to tell me, because I wanted them to actually implement it. So our fitness program is completely implemented by sworn staff. Um, and I've even said I'll participate in it. I won't get the incentives you guys get if you know you reach milestones, but certainly I wanted them, because that's how you get buy-in when the rest of the people that are implementing it, and they're getting feedback from their fellow officers, their peers. I think that's how you get buy-in. And if I just tell them, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this, they'll be grumbling. They don't probably not buy into it. So
Well, I think you're giving them ownership, and there's a certain feeling that comes with that when you're like, man, like I feel empowered to do this. And, feeling more of that team mentality. And then people are inspiring other people and like, holding them accountable and being like, hey, like,
Yeah.
let's work out, let's do this, and so it does create that, I think that feeling of like, okay, like I have that ownership of this rather than someone just pointing at me and telling me to do something. I also think that it's a really interesting, I had this idea pop in my head of like, how do you determine success of a program and kind of identifying that within yourself or within your organization of like, well, what is the definition of success for us? Is that a certain percentage of utilization? Is that, feedback that we're getting? Is it that we're seeing a reduction in injuries because of this program? Like, what are those metrics of success? Because I do think that in some ways it's hard to quantify, but if you are talking to people, like you said, and getting that direct feedback, then you can kind of identify, okay, well, where do we want things to be? And what is our definition of success? Is it, one person is really benefiting from it? Is it 10%, 20%? Is it, what is that? And so I don't know if you have any insights into how you determine, the success of certain initiatives.
We haven't quite figured that out yet, because I think if it's constantly evolving, um, I don't know if there is a measuring stick, but I would definitely say more feedback from staff is how I would measure it.
Mhm.
Um, and as I was talking about, holding each other accountable, peers holding each other accountable. I do see more people going to the gym together, doing jujitsu together. So it is more one person or two people motivating others, and I think that is the gauge of success.
Yeah.
We actually make the program, um, or certain aspects of the program mandatory, but you don't have to participate in the whole thing.
Hmm.
Um, we just ask that, hey, if you go through part of the physical fitness, and hey, maybe you're not at the level that you would like to be. Okay, we'll sit down with you and talk about nutrition and exercise plan and that type of thing. So I think the more we get people involved and we see them that interaction between each other and doing these things, I think that's your gauge.
Yeah, 100%. I I agree that knowledge is power. I believe that the more awareness you have around things, and the more likely you are to make educated decisions. The one thing that I have a challenge with is that there's a lot of fear mongering. And it's like, if you don't do this, then you're gonna die. And m- maybe like it is true to a sense. But I think that a better strategy is to say, hey, like, we know these stats, right? So what can we do to get in front of it? Like, how can I empower you and educate you to prioritize yourself and to take action in a healthy, positive way, not just like try to scare you into doing it. I don't know if that's controversial, if you feel the same, but I just think that there's a lot in the wellness space of like, do this program so that you don't die. And I'm like, no, I don't know if that's the right message. Like, let's
Yeah.
empower people, let's educate people, let's get them the right resources that they need, and give them the tools so that they can, take their own wellness into their hands and they can set themselves up for success.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you there. I think maybe they use those tactics to remind you, hey, you have to do these things, or certain things to make sure that you enjoy your life after retirement. Um, and certainly when I went to the academy 25 years ago, I certainly wasn't thinking about retirement. I wasn't thinking about, my overall wellness. I was thinking about, you know, doing the job, coming in and being the best police officer I could be. Um, it's just, you don't think about those things when you're young. And uh, not that I necessarily say that fear isn't somewhat of a motivator sometimes.
Sure.
Um, I would say, you know, like you said, awareness. If you're making them aware that this is a possibility, these are statistics. Maybe it sticks with one or two people to say, you know, I don't want to be that, and I certainly want to enjoy my life. And I will tell you, I think the newer generation of officer is much more in tune with their emotional well-being, and really kind of identifying that they do enjoy their time off. It's not all about, you know, working extra. Um, to me, it was always work, 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 work.
Mm.
But I do think the younger generation does a better job of identifying their needs, and that's a large part of why we've taken the approach we have with our wellness program. Is they certainly know better than I do about what they want to see.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. And I think that you make some really good points there with, maybe sometimes you do need a little shake or a little like I wouldn't say like reality check, but of like, hey, this, don't be a statistic, like
Right.
let's get in front of it. But um I agree with you. I think, everything that I've heard about this younger generation is that, they are more receptive to some of these things. Like some of these concepts are not foreign, they're things that they've heard before. I think that wellness is starting earlier in careers. Like this is being introduced at an academy level. And then once they graduate, it's also being provided by the agency. And so it's normal. It's not as like, stark contrasted as maybe the older generation of like, hey, we never ever had this and now we do. They're like, oh, this is normal. Like we were introduced to, mobility and yoga and breathing in the academy and, now the agency provides it. And so it's something that we're used to. In in the context of the younger or newer generation, what words of advice would you give to them in the context of wellness? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier in your career, or something that did help you along the way.
Um, Certainly, trying to destigmatize mental health is the big thing. Certainly, coming 23 years ago, we didn't talk about that, and I would go as far as saying nobody talked about your well-being, emotional well-being, your mental health. It really was, you need to be physically fit because you need to be able to handle physical combat. And while I totally agree with that, there was never really a focus on you need to be physically fit so that um, you're preventing injury or you're preventing your body from breaking down. It really wasn't about that. It was, how are you going to handle use of force incidents? How are you going to handle, um, rescue missions, stuff like that. So um, I think the best advice is it's okay not to be okay. Um, it's not a weakness to seek some sort of counseling. It's not, don't think that because you're going through it that you're the only one. I guarantee you there's more. Um, and I, I don't know if I can put a percentage on it, but just from my perspective, how I look at the agency and how they interact with the public, and I generally know when they're going through things, and that's why we try to have early intervention when we start to see patterns of, boy, that certainly that person is struggling with something either personally or professionally, and we need to find ways to intervene. Um, so I want people to start recognizing that stuff in themselves. So I do think that that's the important thing is I want them to recognize it. I want them to take the steps to try and fix it. Um, so my best advice is don't ignore it.
Yeah. I appreciate that so much. And I think that is such a strong message because I also have experience, I'm sure you have too, where like you did ignore things or, I've shoved things down and postured up and I've felt isolated before and like no one else knew what I was going through. And it does really impact your wellness and it puts you in such a dark space. So I love that advice of like, look out for each other, but also look out for yourself, and don't be afraid to seek support if and when you need it. and, don't isolate yourself, and, make sure that you're taking care of you. So thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate you so much. I appreciate your time. I feel like the time flew by so fast. So thank you for
Yeah.
everything. Thank you for everything. I really appreciate your time very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Of course.